Hi, I'm Karyn Parsons, and many people that, if anybody does know who I am, knows me for as an actress. I played Hilary Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, among other things. And in recent years, I started a nonprofit organization called Sweet Blackberry, and our mission at Sweet Blackberry is to bring little known stories of African American achievement to children. And we do that through animated short films and through books. And I also just last year had released my first novel, was published, How High the Moon. And yeah, so it's a historical fiction novel, and I'm here to talk and hang out.
Excellent. Karyn, we're so thrilled and excited. My young self is jumping up and down at this moment because, I'm such a huge fan of your work with Fresh Prince. It really was just formative for me growing up. I grew up in South Africa,
Okay.
and I'm Mahogodi. I'm one of the co-founders of Love is a Kind of Cure. Clavis is on here as well. Clavis, you want to say hi real quick before we dive into some questions for Karyn?
Yeah, Chills, I want to say hi to everyone that's joining us today. It's a gorgeous day in the Northeast, and I know that we are all just overflowing. Well, hopefully all of us on this call are overflowing with happiness over election results yesterday. So I just wanted to thank everyone also for making time to come in and be with us today as we talk to Karyn, and we're just so happy that you're joining us, Karyn.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. Thanks again for asking me. I love what you guys are doing. And yes, I think we're all floating a little bit right now. I know I am. My feet are still a little bit off of the floor after yesterday's news. It's really, just like I feel like a big, huge weight has been lifted,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I actually think that's a really beautiful starting point for our conversation because, the work that you did, and we're very quickly going to pivot and speak about the work that you're currently doing as a writer. But one of the things that struck me about the work that you did as an actor, as Hilary Banks playing that role on Fresh Prince, what it meant to small girls like me watching you, it meant seeing myself constantly, right? And this beautiful reminder in apartheid South Africa at the time that, hey, there's another way of being, and there are possibilities, and we can be beautiful, and we can be sassy, and we can be independent and gorgeous and really big brained at the same time.
Right.
And I think that there's such a parallel between what you did for me personally growing up and what Kamala Harris is about to do for countless women across the world. Very different medium, obviously, but President of the United States. But I wonder if you can talk about this historic moment in light of the impact that young people, and especially, let's be real, like young Black girls, what does it mean to have a Veep who looks like us?
Well, that's it, right? Visibility is everything. I think I really underestimated the impact that playing Hilary may have on other young Black girls when I was doing the show. I'm doing it, I'm thinking I'm playing this character who's so self-centered and all of her things, and she's so flawed. And so it's hard to see the benefit of it. But one thing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air did very well, and I think this is so much of its success, is it did show you this family that were all made up of very different personalities, very different people with very different interests, and they are a Black family, but they're kind of every family in a way, and they're every person for sure. So you're able to tune into it and maybe relate to that character a little, or recognize that character is like your brother, or that character, it's not just one monolithic kind of, point of view or being or thing, and I think that was a real departure from what people were used to. And having that visibility, there were subtle things that I didn't think anything of the fact that my hair was curly through most of the show. I didn't think about the impact that might have until here it is, decades later. And I'm constantly approached by people who say, you don't understand how much that meant to me. You don't understand how much it meant to see somebody with curly hair and it was okay. And she was glamorous and all of this. And, you know, I can look at it now and say, oh, I get it. I get it. You know, I wasn't fighting for something. I was fortunate enough to I honestly just thought I looked better with my hair curly than straight. And I actually wore it straight once on the show early. I wore it later on. I wore it straight sometimes. But early on the show, I remember the first season, I wore it straight, and the producers ran up to me afterward and said, don't ever do that again. We didn't know who you were. So we were watching, and we were like, who's that? Who's that? So, you know, it was one of those things that really, it's great that it went the way that it did. But with Kamala, for instance, again, it's seeing it. It's seeing yourself out there. It's making it real. I think I was just talking to my daughter about this, and we were laughing and saying, it's already history. She's already been elected, right?
Right.
So we're not looking at this pipe
Exactly.
dream thing of like, wouldn't it be great if a woman was elected, or, you know, if a Black woman was this, and we're not doing that. I mean, we don't have to do that anymore. It's happened.
Right.
That happened yesterday.
Right.
You know, now we're on to other things. And just by that door being kicked open, it makes it so much easier, makes us so much closer to kicking it out the windows of so many other injustices, unfair areas. There are things that we know aren't right, things that we know it's not that we look the other way, but we get so accustomed to accepting things that have gone on for so long, like that there hasn't been a woman elected to this high in office, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about it forever, and then it finally happens. And I think it's the same with like, you know, equal pay. You know, my whole life, it's like you talk about, God, women don't get the same. I remember as a child finding out for the first time that women didn't get paid the same as men for the same job. And it made zero sense to me. But, you know, year after year, my life goes on, everyone's lives go on. Some people are fighting for it. Sometimes it makes big news, then it goes away. And things like this make it harder for us to go back to business as usual without taking care of some things that are absolutely of vital importance that we need to not keep pretending are okay, and that we can just move ahead. It's not okay. It's not fair. It's not right. Let's change it. This makes us that much closer to progress across the board, you know?
Absolutely. I'm really inspired by your journey professionally. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot about the work you've done creatively, as a co-writer, as a co-producer, you know, the work that you've done in legacy building and, like, you know, excavating history of African-American historical figures and making it more accessible to everyday people, especially to children. And then, you know, obviously with your novel that you published last year, that being a fruition too of your own legacy within your own family. And honoring, you know, I read that it was largely honoring stories you heard from your own mom. So, you know, I thought one place where we could go might be to talk a little bit about what we're doing here, which is, you know, closing out this epic read along of Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye. Her debut is celebrating 50 years. When we think about what hasn't changed in, you know, what seems like a very short time and also a really long time, and how relevant this book remains for all of us. I just wondered if you could start by telling us what Toni Morrison has meant to you in this book, you know, what it means as a beginning of her career, her literary career.
Oh, well, that's so intimidating, but yeah, that's a little intimidating, but you know, that aside, because she's just a lion.
Yes.
I think the fact that I think that is something though that is huge for me, and I think for so many people, for so many Black women especially, that she was such a lion of literature, that and not like for a Black woman, for a Black person, for a woman, not, you know, no qualifiers, none of this stuff.
Right.
When you think of literature, when people think of literature, one of the very first names that comes to mind is Toni Morrison. Period. And that's huge for us. You know, that's huge. Not
Mm-hmm.
whether you aspire to write at all, or to try to write like Toni. but just that she's like, I have a picture of her on my desktop that I'll probably blow up and put on my wall. And I'm a little nervous about doing it because she looks like seriously no bullshit in the picture. Like she's just looking like, and that's what I like about the picture, because she's looking kind of like at you, like, you know, what are you doing? Like, why are you scrolling the internet?
Do something good with your life. Get to work.
Yeah, like, why aren't you writing? Like, you know, so it's like this great picture. Also, it to me, it feels like that, but it also feels like, what are you writing? What are you saying? And are you really going there? Something that Toni was able to do that I admire so much is she was able to tell these incredible stories that were like dark fairy tales, really, right? With so much truth and so much painful, ugly truth. You know, there was so much, there was, you know, cruelty and the effects of relationships that people carried with them, history that was carried deep inside their every fiber that they didn't always realize, but we would see the manifestation of these things. And so there was so many layers and depth and truth, so that when she's looking at me across the room in that picture, it's like, what are you writing? You know, you can't help but go, are you going there? Are you willing to go there? Yeah. You know, and I think there's a beauty and kindness to her that I feel. I did not know her, but that feels like it's a little bit of, it's a tough love thing. You know, it's like, and she, like Kamala keeps saying, you know, I might be the first, but I will not be the last one to do this. And I feel like Toni is very much like, you know, here I am, or here, you know, but I'm not going to be the last. And she's inspired so many writers after her. And we've got so much wonderful writing. We've been so fortunate to receive the blessings of all these incredible writers that have come after her, directly inspired by her. You know, so she's just, I mean, she's definitely inspired me as a woman, but and I just feel like she was such a strong, tough woman. You know, she's raising her boys, and in between her job editing, she's writing The Bluest Eye. I just don't know, I can't even get my head around that she was writing The Bluest Eye in between stuff. You know, I spent years wanting to write and mostly quietly complaining that I had no time, you know, with the kids, and with the, you know, whining to myself all the time about all the time I didn't have. And then there are people like Toni who did it, who found a way, and she did something incredible and deep and resonant. You know, I love that this book keeps ending up on banned book lists.
Yeah, and we know why. Yeah, I mean, I love that too. You know, I think about that all the time, how revolutionary it was. And Mahahodi and I talk about this all the time, because we're both writers. We're both working on novels, and we write fiction, and we think about this all the time, how when you dare to tell the truth, when you dare to bear the pain that exists, especially for people in our society that are not protected. Right. It is an act of revolution, and it is an act of love. Yes. And so, you know, I've been thinking so much since yesterday, honestly, about Kamala, and I got so teary-eyed. It wasn't only the wine I had drank at that point, but it was like, I was so moved when Kamala said that, because I have Penelope, my daughter is 6 years old, and my son is 8 years old, and you know, the fact that they now get to see a person who's like, her father was Jamaican, you know, her mom was Indian. And it's like, this is what America has been all along. Don't let anyone tell you. You didn't just get here. Immigrants didn't just get here.
That's what America is. And that's what America is, and has always been. Yeah. And you would be told otherwise. There will be people who will say otherwise, right? Who will try to convince, and who have managed to convince Well, quite a few of otherwise, unfortunately.
Well,
Yeah.
Karyn, the theme of invisibility of Black people specifically, but really just folks who don't check the box of what you think of as typically American, I think
Yeah.
that being seen and being seen for all of who you are is
Yeah.
such a potent theme at the center of the Bluest Eye, right? Here's this little girl
Yes.
who is not seen by anybody, and most painfully, she's not seen by herself. And we
Right.
see what the cost of that is. The only way she has into seeing herself is what the world is telling her. And
Right.
I think there's this really interesting parallel between the work that you're doing, helping us revisit so-called invisible people in the past,
Yeah.
because there is this narrative of like Black people just showed up, I don't know, 2 days ago. Like, you were born, where's your birth certificate from again,
Right.
and,
Yes.
and the damage that does, this insistence
Yes.
that Black people weren't here before 1619. I'm wondering how you think about those themes, and if you care to say anything about invisibility in the Bluest Eye and the kind of invisibility you're fighting through your work.
Well, I mean, one of the things with the Sweet Blackberry, that with my organization and the stories about real people in Black history that we don't hear about, that's the whole idea. My mother was a librarian, and she would tell me lots of stories when she was heading the Black Resource Center at her library. That was when I was an adult. And she told me the story of Henry Box Brown, who was an enslaved man who literally mailed himself to freedom in a box because he was so fed up. He had a box, but he came up with this whole crazy, ingenious plan. But the thing is about it is what really got me, the story bowled me over, that it was a real story. But what really got me was that I had never heard this story before. How could I not hear this story? This is a fantastic story for everyone to know about. And I was in a very kind of innocent head thinking like, why didn't I hear this? How come I haven't heard this? And anyway, that would be the impetus for Sweet Blackberry, would be his particular story. But there were many more that my mother would tell me, or that I would research and find out about, or that people would tell me about. And there were more and more stories that I had never heard of, or I had heard whisperings of, or that I heard of, but I'd tell someone else or to tell everyone, and everyone would go, I don't know who you're talking about. And all these stories were being, lost is a kind way of putting it. They were being thrown out, right? They were being like, completely just like deliberately being pushed away, dumped, whitewashed, replaced with other players that actually did this thing, lots of this. And so it was just so important to me to bring these stories to kids. I thought, Henry Box Brown's story was such an obvious, interesting story for children, just visually, a man in a box and having a secret, and then his determination and his triumph, and what that teaches all children about what you're capable of and what your determination, can weather, and what you can get through. I thought that was all really important. But I don't know, did I go off track of what you asked me initially? I feel like I went.
I think that's it. I mean, I wonder, for example, what it would have been like for little Pecola to have known about Bessie Coleman as opposed to Amelia Earhart. And maybe you want to share that story for people who don't know it.
Well, I will tell you, I think one thing that's interesting is that, Bessie Coleman received her international pilot's license, 2 years before Amelia Earhart. Right. And we know about Amelia Earhart, but people don't know about Bessie Coleman, right?
Yeah. Right.
But on the Sweet Blackberry website, there's a clip that we have about the Dolly test. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Dolly test. It's something that started, I think, in the late 30s, early 40s, the Dolly test, and it's something that they've done over the years. We actually have a clip from Anderson Cooper on CNN doing it. That's how recent that clip is. And what it is they would give kids, little Black kids, two dolls, a black doll and a white doll, and ask them which is the good doll, which is the bad doll, which is the pretty doll, which is the ugly doll. And across the board, the Black children would say that the bad doll was the black doll, the ugly doll was the black, and the beautiful doll was the white doll. And we're talking about little kids, really little kids. And all the way up until, like I said, Anderson Cooper was doing it, and he was pointing to pictures of shades of different colored, children with different shades. And this little brown girl is pointing at what she thinks is ugly, and she's pointing to her own skin, which is brown, and saying, it's that it's ugly, it's nasty, and I don't know why it's nasty, but it just is. Like, she has no idea why she's come to this.
Yeah.
We know why. We know what's happened. It's not just it's the media, but it's also just the world, the society. It's children are sponges, and they pick this stuff up from everywhere. And so for you look at Pecola, and so the world is telling you, and we know also with the whole Dick and Jane stories, right? You're painted this very simple story that everyone should be able to relate to. This is just a simple story. Okay, let's break that simple story down. How much do I relate to that? How does that figure into my life? And just that it's expected. I think that's another place where the visibility and invisibility obviously exists, because somebody like Pecola was completely invisible, not considered, not seen, not only not cared for, just not seen, not recognized as existing to have to handle or deal with or address her situation. And except that it is interesting, she's obviously seen by the narrator. She has been seen all along. But I think that's the thing that's really important. I mean, for me with the Sweet Blackberry stories is for children. And I when we weren't in a pandemic, I was able to go out to schools often and speak to children and screen the story of Bessie Coleman, the first Black female aviator, or Janet Collins, the first Black prima ballerina, and show these kids, these people that came before, Garrett Morgan, who invented the traffic signal, and show these accomplishments and things that they were able to do with against all odds, stories that they hadn't heard of. And I would watch kids, and not just Black and brown kids, but all kids, just wide-eyed and so inspired, because they also recognized they don't have to be a Black child to see it and appreciate it. They recognize the adversity. They recognize being the outsider. They recognize the situation being one of huge obstacles, and that this is a hero. This person overcame this and did great things. And some of them did great things that affect me directly today, So that was really the importance of bringing these stories to children, is to empower kids, to inspire them, to show them different versions of themselves and show them what they're capable of, but also to show all children so that they can recognize not just their value, their neighbor's value. They can look at the landscape of race differently. And I think when you hold on to these things, they see how I am powerful. I am incredible. If I want to do this thing, I can. I mean, if you look at how the odds are stacked against so many people, and there are so many more Sweet Blackberry stories, there's so many stories out there that are important for them to see. Like if it's that whole, if you dream it, you can do it. It's like, it's true.
And you see it.
If you see it, it's proof. If you see it, we saw, I mean, when Barack Obama became president, we were just all like, this is such a changing moment. And regardless of the damage that's been done, and yes, we were never in a post-race, that was, we were not in a post-race world, but so much happened in seeing that, in that becoming a true moment in history. And that's the same with yesterday's news. That happened. That's real.
Yeah.
Nobody can take that away. We don't have to just dream about it right now. That happened. And so, I'm still so excited.
Well, one thing that I do want to say, and I want to just say thank you for doing this love work, because, Maho Holi and I, started Love as a Kind of Cure, because we have this deep belief that the way that we correct injustice is through love. Yes. And that, this movement that is happening globally, because it isn't just in the United States, like white supremacy is a global movement that is very much centered on hatred. And when Mahodi and I were talking about, well, where's the counter movement? And the two of us said, well, we're going to do it. Like, we are going to create a movement centered on love, and we're going to bring this brilliant women and artists and creatives to help us both illustrate, celebrate, and activate people toward change, because
Yes.
that's what we believe is necessary. And to me, like, hearing you talk from this place of love, of this place that is really about correcting that invisibility that Mahogany talked about, because we have been here all along. Like, like, our stories are not stories of tragedies. They're also stories of ingenuity, of
Yes.
brilliance, of creativity and imagination. And so to me, it's also that part of it. I think it's a service not just to Black and brown people, but it's a service to everyone in the society, to recognize that everyone that has been here has been doing important work that furthers all of society.
Yes.
Exactly.
So just thank you for that, because I'm feeling hyped right now. I'm like,
oh, thank you. Thank you. No, I love that you guys, because it is, I mean, that's the whole, what's the Martin Luther King quote? I'm not going to be able to, about, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, it is about love. It is a cure. It is a kind of cure. I love that. I love that you guys are doing that.
You just gave us a commercial, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Well,
I want to talk a little bit about, like, your journey becoming a writer, because I think it's so interesting that you were doing the Sweet Blackberry stories, and really thinking about these very important figures that should be known, and then how then you pivoted toward writing this beautiful book. And how did you, because you had mentioned before that you had been thinking about writing and saying it's so hard to find the time to write when you're an adult. So I'm just so inspired too by that. And can you talk to us about your journey?
Yeah, it wasn't planned out, that's for sure. I don't know whose journey really is, though. I wanted to act since I was a little girl. I was that 6-year-old girl that I'm going to be an actress. I'm going to be, year after year. My mom kept thinking she's going to outgrow this. And instead I was watching, Jodie Foster movies, and because she was a kid actor. So I had to see everything that she was in, because I was a kid doing what I wanted to do. And it just went on, and then I was getting involved. I was in, dance stuff, but I started getting in acting classes, and then I discovered an adult acting workshop, when I was pretty young, but they let me in, and I started getting more serious and reading Uta Hagen and Stanislavski and learning craft, and just, but I was always an actor. So even when I got Fresh Prince, and I would, be always jotting things, poems and little short story kind of play. It was all playing around for me. I wrote some little scripts. When the show was over, I did some shorts and things, but I still wasn't thinking of myself as a writer at all. And then a friend of mine made me go to a writing class. She was just pushing me to go to some writing. I didn't know why. And she was just like, I really want you to go to this teacher. He's amazing, blah, blah, blah. So I went, and I fell in love with it. I quickly became that very annoying student, and no one recognized me from Fresh Prince, by the way, in there. Nobody knew me.
I can't believe that.
They No, they didn't. They didn't recognize me at all. But what was really funny is it was a college course. And so there were a lot of young people there that were there taking this class because they needed the credit. I could have cared less, and I wasn't thinking about that part of it. So when class would sometimes end and he'd forget to give us an assignment, I was the one that would say, "Excuse me, you forgot to give us homework."
They love
everyone look. They love me. They would look at me like,
"Who are you? Who is this? What's wrong with you?"
It's just like the president of the nerds.
I was the worst. You didn't give us homework. And then I would show up with, he'd give us an assignment, and I'd show up with 5. Mind you, I had been working on Fresh Prince, and my days and my time had been very busy. And now I was
Compton is in the classroom.
That was me. Yeah, maybe that's why they didn't recognize me, because it was not Hillary behavior. I was like, showed up with, here, I did 5 of that assignment. And he was finally like, okay, stop. You just do whatever you want. I loved it. And then I would later find, that was in LA, and later in New York, I would find workshops and things. But once I had my daughter, it became much more difficult for me to to find the time to write. I was doing it up until, I remember having writing groups at my house and my belly pushing up against the dining room table. So I know I was doing it, up until she was born. But then, so shortly after she was born, I started thinking a lot about Sweet Blackberry, something that had been on my mind because of my responsibility as parent and supplementing my child's education and history and what are they going to teach her in school, so my energy shifted to Sweet Blackberry, and I ended up finding myself writing those stories because they needed to be a script. Still wasn't thinking of myself as a writer. I had loved writing before, but I still was like, because I still thought I was an actor. I still had an agent. So it was still in that game, I guess. I just wasn't thinking. And I was writing Sweet Blackberry stories. And that was all going great. It wasn't until, but I did find myself having some moments after my son was born of real heaviness, because I wanted to write, but I couldn't call myself a writer if I wasn't writing, and I wasn't making time to do it, and I wasn't too embarrassed to tell anybody that this is something I wanted to do, because I didn't have anything to show for it. And I had played this really dingy girl on a show and no one would take me seriously, So it wasn't until I bumped into a friend of mine, and I would throw in a little bit of writing here and there, but not much over the years, aside from the Sweet Blackberry. And I bumped into a friend of mine who was now a literary agent. He had been a journalist, and he was now a literary agent. And he knew me back when I was off of The Fresh Prince. That's how he came to know me, right when the show ended. And I was spending all my time writing those million assignments for my class. He knew me back then as someone who just was writing all the time. And now he's a lit agent, and we bumped into each other at a party, and I thought one day we were going to go hang out, and instead he had me come by his office, and he's like, he knew what I was doing with Sweet Blackberry, and he's like, I think it's time you pitch me a novel. And I was like, huh? What are you talking about? And so I did, and I came to him with a couple different ideas, and one of them was How High the Moon. And that nudge, that vote of confidence from someone who looked at me and basically was like, I see you as a writer. I know that that's what you want to be doing, and I see what you've been doing this week. Blackberry. That was enough to get me to go, okay, let me do this thing. I can do this. I can sit down and do this. And I did. And I don't know how I did, because I'm working on another one and it feels impossible all over again. But I'm going to do it. I went through that when I was doing How High the Moon. I have moments of, what am I doing? This is crazy, and it happened. And so I'm doing it again. But yeah, it was a strange way to get around to that. Back when I was in that class with that teacher, like I said, I really discovered that I loved it. And it kind of eclipsed all this acting love I had for so long. I hadn't stopped loving acting. It just eclipsed it. I found something else that felt bigger and stronger for me. And so here I am right now.
I love that. And I also love that, like, your book centers a young Black girl. And I think, when Mahojodi and I were talking, like, we're so thrilled that you agreed to come, because we felt like so much of the work that we both do is in representation of our communities, and to do it in a realistic way. We attempt to carry the torch. Just like you said, it's too intimidating to try to say we're trying to continue Toni Morrison's work. We're doing our own work, but like, yes, the work is centered in community and centered in telling the truth. And yes, so to me, it's just really lovely that you took that on. And I'm also reflecting on what you're saying, how sometimes we need permission from someone else to allow ourselves to have that big dream, because it seems an impossibility.
We help each other, though. We nurture each other. We know that we do, right? And I think we should all recognize that as nurturers to our friends and our other people around us. Sometimes we tell people, oh, such and such is, you say wonderful things about someone. You might not say it to them without thinking. but if you just tell them, if you turn to them and let them know that somebody sees you or believes in you or that you do this really well, that can mean so much to help that person possibly get over something they're, you know, in that they're going through, or that they need that boost of confidence, you know. Another thing for me with How High the Moon, though, was I was really interested in finding out more about my mother's growing up in the Jim Crow South. You know, she grew up in South Carolina in a little town outside of Charleston, and she always talked about her childhood with such, you know, my mom was always very positive, positive, positive. And she would talk about her childhood in these same kind of glowing ways. Everything was always good and positive and happy. And it took a long time for it to kind of sink in that, wait a minute, you grew up in the 1940s, just in a little tiny town outside of Charleston. You got to tell me more, because there's more to the story. Clearly, there had to be scary moments, dangerous moments, uncertain. You know. So I started digging a little bit to find out more specifics, more about her experiences, and I wanted to kind of put myself in her shoes. Again, a little combination of me at 11 and my mother at 11 in South Carolina in the 40s, and what that was like. And I learned a lot. I also brought in a story of a young boy named George Stinney Jr., who was a real person, from history. A story that a lot of people don't know. And with my work with Sweet Blackberry of little known African Americans, George Stinney's face would often show up. But his story was not a Sweet Blackberry story. It was not empowering or inspiring. At 14 years old, for those who don't know, at 14 years old, George Stinney became the youngest person ever executed in the United States at 14. He was accused and sentenced for killing 2 little white girls in the town of Alkaloo, South Carolina. Something that many years later they would retry the case, realize that the initial trial had been a sham, throw it out. He was exonerated. But of course, this is after this little boy, they had to stack up books on the chair because his head couldn't reach the electrode thing to put on his head. And it was just such a shameful, horrible part of history. But I thought, I would tell people about George's story and nobody knew his story. And I thought that was a travesty too. So I wanted people to know about him. And he just so happened to grow up around the same time, close by where my mother, in another town outside of Charleston. And so George Stinney became one of the friends of the protagonist, Ella, in my story. And so I was kind of able to bring him in and give him a little story, and at the same time let people know a little bit about him. So that's also in there.
I'm so glad you're sharing that. I mean, it's a profoundly painful story. There's just no reason around that. It's a very dark, tough, like it's just hard even listening, to the fact of what happened. But there is something, I think, redemptive in how you're approaching it and in sharing the story. An interesting through line that I keep hearing as you're speaking throughout is the power of stories and how you're attracted to occupying stories as an actor and how you're exploring and sharing stories now, right?
And
that's
something that I know when people have asked me about that journey. I've had to look at that too and go, well, I think it's storytelling. I mean, that's the thing that I think storytelling, and I'm interested in people and their interactions with each other and character. Stories and characters, people, and the things that make people do the things they do. And going back to Toni, I mean, that's one of the things that I find so remarkable in her work, are the complexities, the intense complexities of the stories, but the people and what inhabits them, and from lives before, that carry into them, and you feel like the work just it's just so alive and breathing. I think that's something that's very interesting to me. Definitely, I think is story and character.
the way that you describe it is so rich. It's alive and breathing. But you know what I think is so true about the Bluest Eye and the stories that you're inviting us into today is the power of story to heal. And maybe that's the thing that maybe that's why it's such a attractive technology for us as humans, right? It contains our humanity, but
Yes.
we keep coming back to it like moths to a fire because it is the way forward. How are we going to get out of this mess? Yes, Kamala
Yes.
Harris is VP, but that doesn't change the. I mean, we're in a shitstorm.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
get out of that.
As Dana Bash said on live television.
You know, like, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
And to me, the power of what you do as a writer, and also, you know, the archive of the work that you've created in the past. What ties it with Toni Morrison too is this really transformative thing of story. What happens to us when we take that in?
Yeah, I think you put that very well. That's really true. That is very true.
I also I love what Mahogany is saying. Like it's so beautiful. But to me, like there's also something here at work that I think is so important to social transformation is that we can shy away from the ugliness of what we do to each other. Like the idea that, you know, like this 14-year-old boy would be set up to be murdered, you know?
Yeah.
And that there's another travesty, which is that these two little girls were killed.
Yes.
You know, and like that's an injustice. And so, you know, to me, there's so much about these erasures, you know, because it isn't just that you're erasing the violence to this Black boy, but to these white girls as well, you know, and that, you know, so to me, like that's so much of the work too is and I think about it all the time as a writer, how like the complexity comes from having to tell both sides. Like, yes, the beauty and using the language to celebrate humanity, but it's also about showing it for what it is.
Yes.
I was so frightened, honestly, about the election because I was thinking how very intentionally we were walking as a society toward cruelty again, like children in cages and you know, how many people were disavowing racism in the face of these, the killings of these Black humans, you know, and it was almost as if there was a choice to be made between the kind of society we're going to have, whether there's going to be empathy and humanity in it, or whether it's going to be going back to these darker times of like outright cruelty in the streets. And so to me, like, I also think that's important in your work because, you know, there's so many stories that I think are necessary too. I mean, I binge watch all the time, like the crappy, you know, like Emily in Paris, everybody's like, don't watch that. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I want to watch some hot dudes after the girl too, you know, like we all need that relief. But it's so important to work on and to, you know, have that be part of the work we're doing too, to show these horrors that people have lived through and haven't lived through, that haven't survived.
Right. And it's important too, when we talk about complexity, to see what causes, what would make another person do that. What's happened so that another person could do that to another person. I mean, these are the kind of things that I want to answer, and that writing, it makes me want to write to find out and to understand how, because that's something that I constantly, you know, man's inhumanity to man is just because you can do this or you're faced, why would you do this? You know, and you, but there are answers along the way. You start to see what made this person go. Because sometimes I'll find myself in a room with people and I'll just zone out and picture everybody as a baby. And I'm like, we were all toddlers. Like, what if we were all just toddlers in here, like bumping into each other? Because we all were, right? So like we were all innocent little toddlers. With what?
With champagne in our hands.
With champagne in our hands. but I picture like, you know, us all as like, sometimes it's just like little innocent babies. And we were. So what happens? What happened from here to here, from here to here? What transpired? You know, what went in? What did they tell us? How, you know, what did we experience that made me go from this innocent thing to someone who was capable of putting my knee on another person's neck and just staring defiantly at a camera like, you know, I'll get up when I want to while someone begs for their life that too. I mean, but I want to get to that. Like, I want to understand, not that it ever absolves anybody of anything or excuses anything, but I want to get to the place where my brain can wrap around like, oh, that happened. Oh, and this is this and this and whatever. Like I said, not going to excuse anything, but I want to understand how you got from that toddler to there, and I think that that's something that's important for us. And I think that Miss Morrison has done so much of that with showing incredible, ugly, cruel, difficult things, but we also unravel it, whether going back or forward or however she wants to do it with us, to make us see. And sometimes how much we sometimes are complicit in making people get where they get. And that sometimes you end up pointing back to yourself or having to ask yourself, oh boy, did I have a part in that? Because I looked away or I ignored or I dismissed or whatever, that somehow was one of the building blocks that brought this person to that. I think it's important for all of us as humans to look at the many, many, many layers of the onion and all of the ways that everything is affected. Not just one thing we've done in this country in particular. So for so long now is pointing fingers, and then having these sides, and it's never as simple as that. We're human, we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to try to understand and do what we can to heal each other. And you guys are doing the right thing.
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, I think, as we prepare to wrap up, I'd love to ask you a couple of questions that some of the folks have asked in the chat.
Sure.
There was one question early on about whether or not you ever shared your writing with any of your actor friends. Which I think is an interesting question. Do you have a writing group? Do you have someone that you share your work with? And does that ever extend to some of the folks that you worked with professionally?
No, I mean, Tatiana has read my book. I don't think
We love her. We love Tatiana.
Love Tatiana.
Amazing.
Oh my goodness. I wish I could take credit for raising her, but because I love her so much, and she's just become more every year. She's a more amazing person. I love her so much. But no, I haven't really shared my work with a lot of people. There were a lot of people that didn't know I wrote at all until the book came out.
That's
I was
great.
too embarrassed to tell people. I was too kind of, I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to be, I didn't want people doing like, oh God, she's trying to write what she, because I think, I know what people look at me. As an actor, I had so many doors, kept closed. People said, no, we don't want to see her. We know what she does. And that was as an actor. That was this backhanded compliment that they thought I was Hillary.
Yeah.
So on one hand, they were they were complimenting my acting, but at the same time, they weren't going to let me in the door because they thought they knew who I was. And I know how people often feel like they have an idea of who I am. And, as writers, it can sometimes be a very sensitive place.
Yeah.
And, and it's, you want to invite people in. I have a friend who's very hard on me, really hard on me, like ridiculous. And my husband is also he's that kind of, reader. So I've got people, it's not like I'm afraid of people being tough.
Right.
But you want people to be receptive in the right way too. You don't want people coming in with judgments about your person and thinking, so I didn't early on tell a lot of people in answer to that.
It takes a lot of courage. I mean, regardless of who you are, and I think all of us can relate to that feeling of the outside world having an idea of who they think we are. So really hear you. And also, man, writing is such deeply, it's like all this gnarly personal stuff, and you're going into your own family story, bits of it. Of course you'd have, some hesitation, and then the courage and the bravery to be like, gonna get over it. We're gonna put it out there.
That's
ultimately.
the thing, is having to get over it. That was my thing, was like, you know, what are you going to do? Just sit here forever? Like, I'm not telling anybody, I'm just going to do this, and I'm not going to, you
I
know.
mean, you could, Emily Dickinson.
Wouldn't be very gratifying. It's like, I want to put it out. I want to get better. I want to just do it. I want to fall on my face, and I want to get, you know, like, whatever it takes. I don't want to stop because I'm just petrified.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, let me ask you one more. Katura Hudson asked, would love to hear how Karyn is taking care of herself, nurturing her creativity, particularly this year.
That's so nice to see your face up there. How am I doing? It's been a difficult year. I mean, it's obviously, I'm lucky to be with my family and for us to be doing incredibly well in the face of everything. I will admit that writing has been really hard to focus with the world on fire, you know, with everything that's going on. It's affected what I'm writing as well, because you feel like, well, what is this? This is unimportant, you know, when you've got so much very intense things going on in the world. But I've been, in terms of just how I've been doing and taking care, I think we're trying to take time to bring a lot of joy in our life. Like, I'm trying to do it in everyday little things, especially because we've spent so much time isolated. So we do things together as a family and as a group. And, you know, so we're just trying to make sure that we have a lot of joy in our life, I think, in our everyday.
I love that. I think it is hard though, particularly as writers and moms and just human beings who are awake to like nurture ourselves and to take care of ourselves. And I think just being mindful and intentional of doing all that we do with love, I think it goes a long way.
It does go a long way. And I think it starts to, and when you're doing it, I think others start to feel it and start to do the same. I've seen that in my family. I felt that in the family. Everyone starts to kind of emulate that and starts to try to have the same behavior. It helps. You have to just stay strong and do it. And then other people hopefully will do the same. Keep it going.
Oh, this is beautiful.
Well,
Thank you so much for the time. I mean, Maho Hodi, were there any more questions or any other things you want to talk about?
Thank you. I don't have any more questions, but I did want to call out something that I think is really beautiful that you said earlier in the conversation, and it's at the center, I think, of this moment that we're living through. You said that the bluest eye is so powerful because nobody sees her except for the narrator, right? This other little girl, and that these little girls, they're the ones who are there for one another and who are taking care of each other. And I wonder if you'd like to offer anything about the kind of sisterhood that we're in this moment, right? Regardless of what kind of woman you're in, if you are alive today and you saw what happened yesterday with Kamala Harris, you are part of a sisterhood. And we are the narrators, if you will, of the next 50 years.
Right.
And loving each other and seeing each other is so profound. It stills me.
Yes.
And it also powers me into what needs to be done, because we're celebrating, yes, but we're also really aware of the ridiculous amount of work that's ahead, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I wonder if in closing you'd like to say anything in reaction to that.
I think you just said it. I mean, it was beautiful what you just said. I mean, that's it. It is everything. It is profound. Seeing each other. I think that's really important. And I think in a time where, you know, we tend to get so caught up. One of the things that happened in the pandemic and the lockdown that was kind of beautiful in its strange ways, it made us stop. It made everybody kind of slow down. And I think in that, and we also, there's this crazy appreciation, you know, I miss my friends.
Yeah.
I miss hugging my friends. I miss seeing people in person. I miss, you know, I've had some Zoom conversations. It's just not the same. I miss that. And it's something that I probably took for granted. We all probably did a little bit, but I think that the relationships and the pulling each other up and the lifting each other up that we can do not just by the ways we think we have to, by helping people with getting a job or, you know, all of these, but like what you just said, which is seeing someone and sometimes letting them know, like I was talking about earlier, is you let them know, I see you, or that's so beautiful what you did. Like I saw that, I felt that. It might not seem like anything to us, and we might even find ourselves telling our significant other at home about something, but don't waste it. Tell that person, let them know, you know, don't save it for the obituary when they're not there to hear about it. Let people know.
Yeah.
That, like you said, I think that was really, really beautiful and really, really beautifully put, how profound it is to see each other. I think that's everything.
Oh, we love you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
You're so wonderful and generous. Thank you for making time.
Oh,
It
thank you
means
so
so
much
much
for
to
having me.
us to be with you in this moment.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just really nice to be here today of all days. And like I said, I love what you're doing, and I really appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you
Well,
so
thanks,
much, Karyn.
thanks everybody for coming too. We hope everybody has a good Sunday. Have a nice day.
Yes.
But I want you to know tonight that we will get